Okay, guys, this is part 2 of the fear. You guys may have just watched part 1. So yeah, let's go and keep on. In this next verse, it's in Ezra chapter 7, verse 7. It says, "Some of the people of Israel, as well as some of the priests, Levites, singers, gatekeepers, and temple servants, traveled up to Jerusalem with him in the 7th year of King Artaxerxes' reign." So basically, some background for this is that some people went to Jerusalem with Ezra, and some of them stayed back out of fear because they didn't want to leave. They didn't want to change. And that's very similar to a lot of people nowadays. One very common type of fear is a fear of change, is a fear of giving your entire life up to God, the fear of giving something up to God. And all we think is, God, take this away. Like, you want God, but you're scared of what's going to happen when you give this up, because that's what you want to have. That's what you want to keep. And you're just like, God, can you just please take this away? We feel like God is not answering. But the truth is that God is waiting for us is looking for you to just step out in faith. Some of the notes I wrote down is that it's scary, yes, but that is God testing our faith to see if we actually want him. That's why it says we are saved by faith. We can have faith in God, that God, I know that when I give this up to you, you will give me 100 times more in return, and that's called faith. That's why it says we are saved by grace. That's why it says that we are saved by faith. We can give this up, and we're going to be scared about giving this up. But when we have faith in God, like, even though I'm scared to give this up, I'm going to give it to you, and I'm going to have faith that you are going to use me for you and you alone. And he's going to give us 100 times more in return, like I talked about in part 1. On that, in Hebrews chapter 2, verses 14 through 18, it says, because God's children are human beings made of flesh and blood, the Son also became flesh and blood. For only as a human being could he die, and only by dying could he break the power of the devil, who had the power of death. Only in this way could he set free all who have lived their lives as slaves to the fear of dying. We also know that the Son did not come to help angels. He came to help the descendants of Abraham, which is us. Therefore, it was necessary for him to be made in every respect like us, his brothers and sisters, so that he could be our merciful and faithful high priest before God. Then he could offer a sacrifice that would take away the sins of the people. Since he himself has gone through suffering and testing, he is able to help us when we are being tested. Jesus knows our situation. He was tempted with everything that we have been tempted with. And he desires to help us. He desires to help us in this season of suffering, in this season of fear. He desires to help us. And we cannot let the fear of change hold us back from what Jesus and God want us to become. We cannot let that fear of change hold us back to the next step, which is where we need to be. This is so important for us to learn as Christians, because that is basically the first step of becoming a Christian, is to set aside the fear and give your life up to Christ. In Ezra chapter 3, verse 3, it says, even though the people were afraid of the local residents, they rebuilt the altar at its old site. Then they began to sacrifice burnt offerings on the altar to the Lord each morning and evening. So these people that were rebuilding the altar, they were afraid of the people that lived around the place where they rebuilt it. They were afraid of them, but they did not let that fear take control of them. And they rebuilt the altar, and then God put them into a place where he wanted them to be. Because if they would have listened and gave in to the fear of the local residents, they would have been led to a place where God did not want them to be, which I'll explain in the next verse I'm about to go over. Later on in Ezra, in chapter 4, verse 4, it says, then the local residents tried to discourage and frighten the people of Judah to keep them from their work, to keep them from rebuilding the temple of God. They were persecuting and discouraging them, and the people eventually gave in to that fear of those people, and they stopped building the temple. They let that fear take control of them, and that fear led them to a place where God did not want them to be. But if they would have listened to God instead of the persecutors, if they would have feared God more than they did human authority, God would have led them into a place where he wanted them to be. And they eventually did rebuild the temple, and God led them to a place where he wanted them to be. And then off that last verse, in the verse before that, in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 33, it says, don't be fooled by those who say such things, for bad company corrupts good character. That bad company of the people that were persecuting the people of Judah, they let that bad company corrupt their good character. And this can relate to daily life nowadays. We can let bad company corrupt our good character. That's why we need to place ourselves around people that are going to help us grow our relationship with Christ and help us grow as people, instead of corrupting us, instead of corrupting our good character and letting the fear take control of us, just like the people that were trying to rebuild the temple. In Job chapter 3, verse 25, it says, "What I always feared has happened to me. What I derided has come true." Do you live in constant fear that if you mess up, that God will take away all your blessings, everything that he's given you? We no longer have to live in constant fear that we have to do this, we have to do that to be able to meet God, to be able to find God. But God made it so that when Jesus died on the cross, we no longer had to be made right through what we do, through our actions, but we could be made right through faith and through our relationship with Christ. We don't have to follow a set of rules or regulations, but through a relationship with Christ. And through that relationship with Christ, we build love, strength, and confidence. And that all that stuff that comes from a relationship with God makes us want to follow makes us want to be obedient to him and his will. In Numbers chapter 13, verses 32 and 33, it says, "So they spread this bad report about the land among the Israelites. The land we traveled through and explored will devour anyone who goes to live there. All the people we saw were huge. We saw giants. They're the descendants of Anak. Next to them, we felt like grasshoppers." And that's what they thought too. We cannot let bad news corrupt what we cannot let bad news drown out what God has said, what God's truth has done in our life. We cannot let bad news drown that out. But we can be like Caleb. Like in verse 30, Caleb said, "But Caleb tried to quiet the people as they stood before Moses. 'Let's go at once to take this land,' he said. 'We can certainly conquer it. We can certainly conquer it because we have God on our side.'" We don't have to have giants. We don't have to have super strong people, but all we need is God. All we need is to have God's power on our side, and God's power can overcome anything that we face, no matter what it is, no matter who it is, no matter what. We need to say at once, let's go at once to take this land. We can certainly conquer it because we have God on our side. So thank you guys for watching. That was a two-part series on fear. I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you guys have any questions, just message me on my social medias, which will be in the description of part 1 and part 2. So thank you guys for watching, and yeah, hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.